Now, the final question that I've got is, as nurses, when we get together as a group of nurses, the conversation is not always clean, but it's we all share that common language, and as nurses we all know the language that we talk. We don't and to strangers or people that aren't nurses that come in, it's a foreign language that we speak. So this is about what is a memorable event or moment that you will remember vividly, as deeply etched in your mind. Via Margaret.
Good, thank you. Just before I get into that, Ash and Beverly have mentioned the recent events in the association as reported in the journal, which is the only avenue I have of knowing about these things. I also have been absolutely appalled that that situation could have happened. I left school and became a nurse, and I've always seen myself as a nurse. And I know that I have an affinity with nurses in a way that I don't have with other people. That it's part of me. And I think nursing as a profession is an amazing profession. And I never, ever regret that I became a nurse. But there are aspects of nursing that are, I think, very unsatisfactory, and they just persist. I think that when I left nursing, I moved into the wider public service, and immediately I knew I was in a different work environment, that the bitchiness that is such a feature of nursing was not there any longer, and I didn't ever encounter it anywhere else in my career. And when I look back to my time, particularly as a more junior nurse, I still carry hurts at the way some people treated me, and that I had no way of defending myself against. And it's quite, I think it's very serious that 50 years later, people are still talking about the same thing. One of the things that really distressed me as president of the association and then as director of nursing was the way that the existing nursing workforce treated the graduates from the system of general education. And it's appalling that 50 years later, people are still talking about it. So I think there's a big elephant in the room that nursing has, and it's really for the association, I think, to try and deal with it. It's the elephant in the room that no one really grapples with, and if the association doesn't, then no one will. But it's a very unsatisfactory part of the way you live as a nurse, living in that environment. It's a destructive environment. So I'm sorry to meander into that, but I think, I won't have an opportunity to ever say this again. It's been a long, long time since I was able to, had a platform to talk about some of the issues in what is a wonderful profession, and I think an amazing organisation that I was quite distressed to see it sort of tearing itself apart, which is not good for anyone. But anyhow, when I thought of the special times, there are various things that I reflect on in my life, and one of the amazing moments for me, which Ash will probably experience as well, was going into the ICN conference in Mexico, where I led the New Zealand delegation behind the New Zealand flag. It was one of the really, truly great moments in my life that I remember often. I remember the when we got the first decision for the transfer of nursing education, that was one of the huge moments in my life, and it was nursing that gave me that experience. And then later on, as I've grown older, I've had encounters with the health service, with my partner dying in the health service and other close people. And those encounters, each time, I thank God that I was involved in getting the transfer of nursing education moving. When I see the quality of the nursing care being delivered by a qualified workforce as opposed to a partly trained student workforce that it was in my day, and a workforce that has a broad education, that understands the technological and the complexities of healthcare, the social side, that the breadth of the experience and education of the current nursing force, I think, is just amazing. And I always look with great pride and pleasure of something that I had a small part to play in. So there, I don't know if that's what you want, but it's basically. And I should also tell you, one of my very best friends was Pearl Penny, a Maori nurse who trained at Dannevirke, who came from Dannevirke, who died a couple of years ago, and I still miss her desperately. That you make friendships that are lifelong, and I've had, I still am friendly with the person who was in the room next to me when I started psychiatric nursing over 60 years ago. So you have great friendships, great people. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for inviting me to be part of your discussion.
Thank you. It's been fantastic. Beverly.
Yes, well, this was one of the hardest things I've had to do, and try and think what was the most memorable. So I'm just going to give you a couple of little vignettes, if that's all right, because there's nothing that stands out in particular, because you have a lot, as a nurse, you have a lot of memorable moments. But just picking up from what Dame Margaret said, you do form lifelong friendships. And when I trained, of course, we had to live in the nurses' home. And one of the things I can vividly still remember is you'd come off shift, especially in the evening, having counted teaspoons and and you'd get your cup of Milo and you'd sit in the corridor at the nurses' home, usually around a heater, and you'd, what we moaned and groaned, but what we'd now call debrief from your shift. And the bonds that you form from sitting with people that have been on the same shift live forever. We recently had a reunion for the nurses that started in our class, and we'd also in the same year I had a reunion for a school class. Now the school class was fine, but we had all gone our different ways in our school class, and so the only commonality was being at school. When the nursing reunion happened, well, from when we started to when it finished, we just talk, because we were so specific in what we were doing, and we had so many stories to tell. And it was just incredible. So those bonds, I can really appreciate what Dame Margaret is saying. You do keep lifelong bonds. One of the more memorable moments in my career was during the nurses' strike in the 90s. And at that time, my mother had been hospitalised, and because of her condition, had become paralysed from the waist down. And I thought once the strike happened that she would be discharged, because they knew that I was a nurse and I would be able to care for her, because they were, of course, trying to discharge as many patients as possible from the hospital. However, she remained in the hospital. And during the strike, because I was working in delivery suite, we were considered an essential service, and we had basic staff on the ground, but we had backup, and so we had to stay on site as backup. And I went to see her after my shift had finished, and the nurse that was caring for her said, "Oh, your mother needs catheterisation and we just haven't had time to do it. Would you be able to catheterise her?" And, you know, ethically, one shouldn't be treating one's family. And I was also in conflict, because here I was trying to support the strike, and yet I was doing, or being asked to do, a nursing care on a patient. My mother, of course, was horrified to think that her daughter was going to have to catheterise her, because that generation, you know, that just wasn't done. And it was a very difficult situation for me and for my mother. Obviously, I did catheterise her, but it was a very difficult time for her at that stage. And another situation I had, it was back in my midwifery days, and I was caring for this woman, and labour was not progressing as well as it should. And eventually she got to what one calls full dilatation. And unfortunately there was no progress, and her doctor had suggested assisted delivery, and she was very much against it. This woman had a background of teaching. She was very well read on the process of childbirth, and had planned her birth, had presented a birth plan, and she was going to adhere to this birth plan despite the powers of her own body and also the baby. So eventually the baby was born. The doctor and I were very concerned about the baby. It was rather flaccid and it did require some resuscitation. But she was happy because she had delivered the baby the way she wanted it. And of course, when you work in a hospital situation, once they are discharged from hospital, you are unsure of how the follow-up has occurred. However, about 4 years later, I met up with her in the postnatal ward, and she had just had a further child. And whilst I was talking to her, her family arrived. And down the corridor came this little girl with a very marked limp, quite a spastic limp. And I thought, oh, this is this little girl that I helped care for. And once the family had gone, I went back to that woman and I said to her, oh, I think that was the little girl that I was with last time. And we talked about her birth. And even though the outcome for the child was not as I would have liked, the mother was very satisfied with the way that her labour and birth had been conducted. And it made me reflect on my nursing practice quite a lot, that here we are, as a midwife, you're advocating for both the mother and the unborn child, but the mother's needs are also to be considered. And that has always stuck with me right through my training, that it's not just what I believe should be advocated for. I must always listen to the person that I am working with and caring for. And so, yes, and that was way back in the 80s. So that has always held me in good stead throughout the rest of my career. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to go, Kerry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be
Thank
in
you.
touch, Dame Margaret. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
As a fellow midwife, Beverly, I could relate to all of that. There is nothing more precious than being at that birth. There's nothing more special than that moment. But you do contemplate, especially in the more challenging decisions that you have to make at a time that's really critical, have we made the right decision? So I'm always, like yourselves, when I happen to come across somebody years later and then see their child, it just is such a relief, and you kind of think I was part of that, and
Yes.
it's such an amazing experience. Thank you for sharing. Ashley.
I guess the most memorable moment for me has very much been attending the Indigenous Nurses Aotearoa conference last year. I guess like many of us, we're not just students, we have many other roles as we're going through our learning journey, and it can be challenging at times, to say the least. And having that to look forward to, and particularly even being in the middle of the year where we've gone through our initial lot of exams, being able to just come together with like-minded individuals and share in that experience where you're surrounded by incredibly inspiring people such as yourself, Kerry, and the many other speakers there, and just connect, learn, share and grow together with both national and international professionals. And I think it's just a good reminder of your why, being surrounded by people who are dedicated to achieving equitable outcomes for our people. So that's the biggest memory for me at the moment. And although we didn't get to have it as planned this year, I've been incredibly grateful for the other opportunities that we have had to come online and connect. Because, I guess reflecting on this year, another challenge amongst this whole COVID situation has been, I guess for many it has been quite isolating. So to come together, even today, and thank you for the invitation, Kerry. It's been great. It's filled up my cup again. It has lifted my wairua again. And thank you to Beverly for sharing your journey, and to the other amazing wahine. I'm very grateful. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Ashley. Yeah, COVID's done some crazy things. Our way of connecting and touching each other is by seeing our faces over a screen and learning to look up into the screen as opposed to down where wrinkles form in open places. But I think it highlights the same thing as that Beverly mentioned. It is the conferences that bring people together. It is a common ground where we can be proud to be who we are, and we're proud to be part of such an amazing profession, albeit it comes with its hang-ups, and there's some things that we definitely do need to call out. I think Dame Margaret called it the elephant in the room. There is lots of work that we need to do, both as a union, as an organisation, and as a group of health professionals, both inside New Zealand but also internationally. We've seen some, and we've had some amazing what we call weddles or challenges thrown out today, and I think people, when they see the panel discussion, will be able to relate to a lot of the stories. And it's important that our journeys of telling stories and sharing this amongst the future nurses isn't lost just today. So we do intend through Maidi's work to develop up a story pool. Those stories that you told Beverly today, the whakapapa around the College of Midwives, that's something that's amazing. The journey of Whaihane Moa. We can't let stories be lost. We can't let stories just end here and not actually provide stories to pass on to our future aspiring nurses so they can see the journey as it's unfolded and be part of such an amazing history of New Zealand nursing history, told by New Zealand nurses and nurses that have worked alongside our people. So I'm really privileged to have been part of this discussion and sharing some stories, and I'm sure our members will be equally as privileged. I'm just going to pass to Mairi, because Mairi's going to do some amazing words of wisdom to help wrap this up now. Do you want a drum roll, Mairi?
Oh my gosh, Kerry, can't wait. Look, I've just sat here and listened, and I'm just so inspired by the stories that have been told and what you've done in the past to bring us to where we are today. It's an ongoing journey. It doesn't stop here, but I really appreciate the work that you, Beverly, Dame Margaret and Whaihine have done to set the pathway for us that we're still travelling on. We have a long way to go, even though you would think, as Whaihine talked about, 50 years later we're still in the same place, and Dame Margaret said similar things around our what am I going to say, our lack of advocacy and not having the strength, the voice that we should. You know, we've got to remind ourselves who we're here for and what it is we're here for, and it's to be the voice of our members. And, you know, that's over 50,000 nurses and others that we represent. And it's as a staff member, I absolutely take that seriously, that I am representing them and I need to be their voice. And I accept the wero that have been put down there to progress wherever I can. Beverly, you talked about education and having better packages of education for nurses, similar to what our medical colleagues are receiving. And that is work that we are looking at now. And also we talked about supporting NEP students, new nurses, into practice. And again, we're working on that, but you know, there's several steps more that we need to be addressing to make sure that the new graduates are getting a really good deal. So what we have done, we're working with the Ministry of Health and the DHBs to ensure that every new graduate has employment in nursing within 6 months of graduating. And that's for enrolled nurses as well, new graduate enrolled nurses. So, you know, that's where we're at the moment. But as I say, we've got a long way to go. And the opportunity for me is to push and progress that. You know, I work with a really great team of policy research analysts, professional nurse advisors, lawyers, media, the teams that I work with, the library, kaitiaki, you know, they have the ability to push things forward as our members deserve and expect, actually. I often say that I had no idea how vulnerable I was as a nurse, but I do now that I manage the lawyers. I see the complaints that come through, the HDC cases that come through, and I look at them and think, my gosh, that could so easily have been me in many of those situations. You know, nurses are vulnerable, they're stressed, and I wonder if that's a lot to do with the way we don't look after each other properly. You know, we're dealing with our own problems, our own stresses every day at work, and we've got to get that right. We have to advocate to sort that, because we can only sort the rest of it, the elephant in the room, if we get that right for our members first, I believe. So yes. Really, really honoured to be a part of this discussion today. I didn't actually, I wasn't expecting to hear such amazing stories, and I thank you all, because, you know, now it is my challenge to move forward. You've all done your bit, and I'm grateful to you. Ashley, you and I and others have got a long way to go. We've got to keep moving. And for myself, you know, like you, Ashley, I was supported into my role, into many of the leadership roles that I've had, by being a part of Te Rūnanga, and regional council in Bay of Plenty, Tairāwhiti. So I'm very honoured to have been a part of, an active part of NZNO for about 12 years, I think. And, you know, it's my duty to continue to keep progressing for the sake of our members, which is also going to be have positive effect on the people that we care for. So that's all I've got to say. But again, Kerry, thanks for giving me the opportunity to open my mouth. And when I wasn't really supposed to say anything, I was just to join in and listen. But thanks again.
Well, that's what we said nursing is, right? Whenever there's a nursing story, nurses are in there with their own. Yeah, again, I just want to thank you both for remaining through this long journey, but also the sharing of the stories and listening to Dame Margaret and Whaia Haniromoa. This whakapapa of our NZNO nursing history needs to be recognised, and we need to share that more widely. The stories of perhaps we are too ladylike, perhaps as a predominantly female organisation and profession, perhaps the ladylike stigma needs to be let go, and we need to still talk about it in the professional light, and the political voice that we need to have to make affirmative action and change and fights for rights and privilege for our patients. Notwithstanding the fact that we still need to ensure that we advocate and hold the ground for nursing and nursing education, however that needs to evolve into the future. First and foremost in our mind needs to be about nurturing the ones that are going to be replacing us and taking our voice forward, but keeping them firmly on the ground. Keeping their feet firm on the whakapapa and the history that has got us to where we are now. I think that's some of the criticisms I've heard from some of my older colleagues is, you young ones don't know what we fought for back then, so don't lose it for us. So I think telling the story of the challenges empowers us to move forward and use some of those old skills that we've had, but also how do we develop it in this modern day and age? How do we prepare for what the future of nursing needs to look like, especially in the year of the nurse and midwife 2020? And if And if the intent of the Year of the Nurse and Midwife 2020 was to expose nursing, I think we've achieved that. We certainly have achieved that nationally and internationally. But we do have to call out things. We do have to call out bad behaviours. We do have to call out and protect the unity of nursing, but also deal with some of those hard, challenging things that we can no longer keep in the closet, but we have to address to make sure that the future is safe for everybody to walk forward on. And I really loved what Dame Margaret said when she said that, and I wrote it here about bitchy, and she said this is, you know, at all the places that I've worked, this is working as nurses as being bitchy. So perhaps we need to use that constructively to move something forward, as opposed to reflect that too much moving forward in our behaviours. But the camaraderie, the working together, the strength and unity, the remembering our roots, where we've come from, knowing where we have to go to future develop nursing, but also not shy away for and enable the epidemics of poor health outcomes, of diabetes, of congestive heart failure, of mental illnesses continue. We need to stop that, just as we're trying to combat COVID-19, and stop epidemics that seem to have taken a grip on some of our people. So there is a quote from James Hennady which says that we've come too far not to go further, and we've done too much not to do more. So unfortunately for us, our job of advocacy and protection of the organisation and that of the profession is not over yet. We've got more to do. So Beverly, I really want to thank you for joining, and my heart's with your heart, the midwifery stories. I'm right there with you, and it made me flash back to when I was after an afternoon shift, when I'd go to Cashmore Hostel and would sit around, and this time I think we'd become, you know, pretty sophisticated. We had super wine biscuits and cheese and a hot Milo. So, you know, we all have those stories that we connect with, eh? And Ashley, good luck at your international platform in advocating for the future of nurses and the protection of our voice in a small country like Aotearoa. The future is in your guys' hands, and we need to make sure it's well protected. Mairi, you've got some work to do, and to make sure that bargaining is not just about working conditions, but it's about rights of education for nurses, and to very much keep that on the radar and not to be lost. So I thank you both for seeing this through to the end, and I'll ask Mairi to close if you've got nothing more to say, Beverly.
No, I just wondered if I could add a wee something to the
Sure.
conference, if that's all right. I just want to wish you all the best for your virtual conference, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you who have worked so hard at the forefront during the COVID outbreak. You have all sacrificed so much to ensure the safety and health of our nation, and to keep me at my age safe. So I'd like to thank you very much, and you can stand very, very proud. And I'm sure you do. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Beverly. Ash, any last words from you?
Beverly beat me to it. I'd just like to total everything she said, basically. It's been an incredibly challenging year for everyone. And also, as you said, Kerry, with it being the Year of the Nurse, that's certainly been highlighted above and beyond. So yeah, thank you to all our incredibly amazing workforce, our nurses. Kia ora.
Kia ora, tautoko. And Mairi, we'll conclude with you, and thank you, Marcus, for keeping us on track and filming us. But I'll let
Good job.
conclude.
Kia ora, Kerry. Kia ora tātou. Ka nui te mihi kia tātou kua hui hui mai tēnei wā, tino pai ngā kōrero i te rānei. Me oti tātou i tēnei hui te karakia. So me inoi tātou. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ariki a ihu karaiti me te aroha o te atua me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. Ake, āmene.
Amen.
Mene. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of